All right, let's get started. So welcome everyone who's here right now and people coming in. Welcome to a Codacy talk. This time we're going to talk about linter configuration and best practices to improve code quality. So my name is Eloisa from the Codacy marketing team, moderating this session as always. And with me today is Lorenzo Gabriele. He's a software engineer here at Codacy. Is passionate about creating tools, especially about Scala development. He's involved in many open source Scala projects, joined Codacy a few years ago as a linter maintainer, and is now helping us build the platform to help engineers manage their code quality. And as a guest speaker, we have Jeroen, who is a senior software engineer at CrowdStrike. And Jeroen is also, involved in creating tools to make developers' job easier. He's actually the author of a code linter called Elm-review, a static code analysis for Elm. And he also co-hosts a podcast called the Elm Radio Podcast. So with everyone being presented here, before we begin, I just have two announcements to share with you. The first is that, as you can see on the screen, by attending this session, you have a chance to win our giveaway of this webinar, which is the Razor Crest Lego prize. So you'll be contacted soon if you're the winner. And secondly, if you're interested in the topic of generative AI in engineering and how it's changing the way we do code reviews, stay tuned to a very special little update that we have at the end of this session. But I'm going to save it for the end. And for now, hold on. Let's just go through what we have planned. Very short agenda for today is, obviously, we're going to have a casual conversation here between Jeroen and Lorenzo. They're going to talk about linters, configuration, what it's like for users, for linter authors, and so much more, starting by defining what is code quality, which may not mean the same thing for everyone. So code quality, then a nice live discussion, a Q&A where you're going to have a chance to ask all of your questions. To do that, you just have to click the Q&A button here at the bottom, and I'll be watching your questions and saving them for the end. We'll get them all answered. And yeah, like I said, a little sneak peek at the end, but you'll have to stick around to learn more about it. So without further ado, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and let Lorenzo and Jeroen take the stage.
Hi. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it's very nice to have you here, Jeroen. And yeah, I wanna start by asking you, like, if we are on the same page, so we agree and we can define. I know it's very hard to define what is code quality because it's not something you can define like mathematically, but maybe you have like some definition for us, or maybe we can have some like something we can agree on. I don't know. What do you think when you think about code quality? What do you think?
Yeah, I have one definition in mind, but yeah, it might be different for you. So the one how I would define code quality is how reliable your code is and how easy it is to change. So if we try to say that the code is high quality, it must not have a lot of bugs, right? If it has a lot of bugs, like however the code was written, we're not going to say it's high quality. But even if the code does not have any bugs, if it's really hard to maintain, we're not going to say it's high quality either. So for me, those two qualities need to be there for the code to be called high quality. And yeah, so reliability and ease of change. And the way that ease of change, in my opinion, is, to me, it depends on familiarity. So that's something that linters will help with. In general, like linters, they will try to find bugs for you, so that improves the code quality. It will try to make your code more familiar, more consistent. That also helps quality. But yeah, if you want to have code that is easy to change, it needs to be familiar to you. in the sense that you are used to the code style that people are using. So for instance, if I have a code base that is using object-oriented programming code style, and I'm using a functional programming code style, it's going to be hard for me to make changes to the code base without introducing any bugs, and vice versa with all of the code styles. So for me, familiarity is important. So it's always dependent because it depends on the developer. But the way that a linter can help is that it will make code more consistent. So that even if the code is unfamiliar to you, it will become more familiar to you quite easily. So for instance, if you see a code base which is unfamiliar to you, but everything is consistent, well, you will learn a few patterns, and then you will be able to find those all over the code base, making it much easier for you to get familiar to the code base, and therefore to make the code more easier to maintain.
Yeah, because you learn a thing once, and then you can reuse your learning multiple times.
Yep.
Makes a lot of sense. Also because we know that maintenance is probably one of the highest costs in software development, right?
Probably the biggest, right?
Yeah, because you write the code once, and then you leave it there, and then it's like 10 years of people that needs to maintain it. So better leave it something maintaining that helps maintainability. Yeah, I think we're on the same page. I think code quality is probably, if we can have a definition, is very like a definition that can be objective. It's very similar to what you said, but at the same time, I think what people define code, like code to have the things you described, it's subjective. So maybe something for some teams, X can be like what you described, but for other teams, it's Y. So it's for that, it's nice that we have like linters that support configuration, because this way a team that prefers the style X can configure their linters to move their code base to be consistent on this X or whatever X means, and another team can configure their linters so they can tend their code base to go to Y, let's say. So
absolutely.
Yeah, and so you already mentioned linters, so you already know that you are very into them, as also we are, because we are like a company around that. So we all are around linters. So I think we all of us like believe in linters as a valuable tool to help in our job, let's say. And so do you want to tell us why you think that, and but I think yes, why you think like linters are essential, like an essential tool for software development, other than that, like helping on like consistency?
Yeah. So the way I see it, we as developers, we have to maintain code, and we have to fix a lot of bugs, right? We make some code, we ship it, someone tells us, hey, there's a bug, please fix it. We fix a bug, and we continue our day fixing other bugs. So as we grow more experienced, we go from fixing bugs to try to fix bugs and fix bugs and try to prevent them from happening ever again. So for instance, it's just like I have a bug. Well, now I'm going to write a regression test to make sure that this bug will never appear again. And writing a test is one of the tools that we have to improve the quality of the code and to make sure that there's no regressions. And I think as you grow as a developer, you will reach for more and more of these tools to get more and more confidence and guarantees about your code that it behaves the way it should behave. So getting acquainted with test-driven development or other practices that are similar to that is a big step to that. using compiled languages, using type check languages. Those help a lot with that. And linters is also one of those. Linters is just one other tool that we have that don't rely, that rely on a different level of, that have a different approach to looking at the problems than a type checker. So a type checker looks at values and types and whether they match or not. Tests, they look at specific scenarios that you've written for them, and whether values are the ones that you expected, given those scenarios. And a linter looks at the code base and just tries to find a lot of problems or inconsistencies. So like we have 3 different approaches just with these 3 tools to improve the quality of our code. And I think if you're missing one of those, you're gonna have a lot of problems. And I just mentioned these 3 tools, but there are more of those. It's just the main 3 that I tend to use.
Yeah, and also having overlap is not a problem, right? Because if something is tested, but at the same time you have a compiler that checks that, doesn't mean that your test is useless, because maybe there is like a corner case that your compiler on a future version of the compiler will not catch, but your test will catch. At the same time, a linter and can catch problems that compilers can't. Because I think I don't know if you agree with me on that, but I think the difference like between a linter and a compiler is like a compiler needs to be objective, because everything that passes a compiler should, so a program that doesn't pass the compiler is like a wrong program 100%.
Yeah.
Instead, with linters is like there is some subjective inside. So like there is, according to this idea, this program is incorrect.
Yeah, I would add a bit of nuance to that, but yes. So a compiler will tell you if there's a problem in the way that the code, the compiler, if the compiler is not able to transform your code into valid binary or something, then it's going to report a problem. If it is possible for it to make a binary, then it will likely just pass. Some of the compilers, especially the Elm compiler, adds a lot of additional checks, which looks kind of like a linter, to make sure that the code behaves is written in a specific way. So the addition for me for linter is the fact that you can configure it, that you can adapt it to your own code style, but also that you can like write custom linter rules that make sense for your project. So a compiler is very generic. It works for all possible valid programs for that language. But a linter will always work for your project. Like you can and you should probably customize it to your project to increase the number of guarantees that you get, and make sure that it works as expected.
Yeah, also because there might be one thing that for the compiler point of view is not an error, because there might be another project where that thing is valid. Yep. But in your project, that is an error. And if you set up your linter correctly and your linter is good enough, the linter will find it.
Yep.
Very nice. Listen, Elisa, we have some questions in the chat. I don't know if you want to answer them now or later, or what do you think?
Yeah, as you wish. There's 2 questions from the same person. You might want to address them now. So Peculiar Ume is asking, why do linter label auto-generated code as being low standard on Codacy?
Yeah. So the thing is that auto-generated code usually is not meant to be like manually maintained, or it's something that the tool generates, but it's to be consumed by compilers and not by people. So usually, at least this is what I do. I don't know if it's like a universal thing, but usually I disable linters for this type of code, because this like goes directly to the compiler pipeline. Usually I even avoid committing that and regenerate all the time in my CI/CD. So in Codacy, you can, for example, we have a feature to disable linting for those files, and probably you should try that. Maybe will help. Yeah. But
you usually don't care how the generated code is written. So the code quality doesn't have to be as high. There are like a few things, a few linters where it would make sense to for the linter to look at generated code, like for instance security issues. But for the things like code style, like really doesn't matter too much.
Yeah,
no
because
no one is going to maintain that code.
Yeah, exactly. Also because who writes the code generator tends to optimize not for like readability, more for like creating very performance code or code that works well, not that reads well. Usually you shouldn't even read that code.
Yeah, I think it depends on the community, but yeah.
Yeah, it depends. Yeah, I'm biased on what the tools I used, of course, and so yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, I think we can go back to our discussion. Yeah.
Right.
I hope we answered the question. And yeah, I wanted to ask you about like linters automation, because yeah, linters are nice and all, but they're not free. I mean, they are free because most of them are open source and you can install them for free. But there is some work to set up a linter. It's not so. Imagine you have like a 1,000,000 lines code base, and tomorrow with your cup of coffee, you go, okay, I will lint everything. Yep. It's not that you click a button and all the linters will be automatically up and running. So there will be some setup to do. And yeah, so when this trade-off is worth it, is it always worth it? And so maintaining like manually linters, what do you think about it?
Okay, plenty of questions.
Sorry.
No worries. So when does it make sense to automate your linter? Was one of your questions. I think always. Like the question is basically, is a linter worth having? And I'd say yes. There are a few exceptions to that. Like one is if you're very pressed for time, then maybe it's not time to configure your linter right now. But just like any tool, like investing in your tooling in the long run will be worth it. But if you're really pressed for time, maybe not. But that's a series of trade-off that we leave to everyone, to each person. So that's one reason why you wouldn't want to do it. The other reason is if the tool is bad. Like you can have bad linters. I'm actually fighting for people to improve their linters. So look at how elm-review does things, and you'll see how a good linter works. So for a bad linter, that's usually a tool that reports a lot of false positives, meaning it actually takes a lot of your time. So false positives is when the tool reports an issue when it shouldn't, when there is no real issue. And that is just a very big time waster. So tools should try to prevent as many false positives as possible, but there are trade-offs on that. Sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes the tool is just not smart enough. But yeah, and then the third reason is if the tool is really hard to configure. That's kind of a bit like it takes time and it reports a lot of false positives. So I like to think about accidental and essential configuration, kind of like essential and accidental complexity. So essential complexity is when you configure a tool to do what you want. So for a linter, that is like, which rules do I want to enable for which files, etc. For a build tool, it's like, how do you want to build your application, to compress everything to a binary? Which files do you want to take? Which optimizations do you want to enable? Those kinds of things. So that's essential configuration that makes sense. Accidental configuration is when you need to tell the tool how to work with your project. And those are the ones that we should try to prevent as much as possible. So I have a current example in my head, which is TypeScript. I tried adding TypeScript to one of my existing projects, and I'm getting a lot of errors, not because it's wrong, but because I misconfigured the tool. And the thing is, I don't know how to configure the tool yet. And that is wasting a lot of my time. So if that tool was smarter, then I would not have those configuration errors.
Yeah, on their defense, like typing JavaScript is a very hard task.
I know.
So yeah, something that in a dynamic JavaScript is complete does make sense. On a static compiler point of view, can be like a nightmare. So yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely. So
yeah, I wanted to add something on this. Because if I think also the amount of code you write in a certain language affects this decision a bit, because if you have like a language that you use on a certain script buried on a file in a directory that you don't touch that much, maybe it's not worth it to spend a day configuring perfectly a linter for that language.
Yeah. So a linter is, again, a tool to maintain code. If you don't intend to maintain code.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Also, it's where like tools like Codacy can help in that, because I as developing Codacy, I see like this trade-off between when you are the maintainer of the linter in your CI/CD pipeline, and when like an automatic tool does it for you. When you are maintaining the tool, you are configuring, you are in charge of deciding what the tool should do. And in case of like very good linters like elm-review, it's easier. But in case of like other tools with like dynamic languages that are noticeably hard to lint, can be a nightmare. And it's where like you can outsource, when like for languages that you are a side problem on your project, you can outsource to something like Codacy, where Codacy, okay, I will try my best to auto configure it for you and give you good defaults, so you can focus on something more valuable for you, for your company, let's say.
Yeah. But for code that you intend to maintain and that you know quite well, I would urge people to configure their linters manually. So you kind of have like a spectrum of you choose all of the rules yourself, and you use someone else's configuration. And it's a spectrum, right? And I would push people towards more the choose which rules you enable, because if you take someone else's configuration, that configuration might not make a lot of sense for you, for your project, for your team. Whereas if you choose the rules yourself, you will have something that works for you. Like, one of the big problems with linters is that they report a lot of false positives. They tend to, at least. It doesn't have to. That's something I would like people to know. Like, they don't have to, but usually they do. And one of the false positives that people get is an effective false positive is when people enable rules that they don't agree with. So if you don't enable rules you disagree with, you should be a lot happier. So yeah, and maybe I know this is a lot of big task for a lot of companies, like, oh, we're focused on product, but again, invest in tooling, it will work out in the long run. So choose your rules wisely. Talk to your team about it, like which rules you want to enable. Make sure that they don't get frustrated, and everyone will be happy.
Yeah.
And even if you have to start with like very few rules, you can add them one by one, and things will go well, I think.
Yes, also, and this is like more important as you scale as a company, because if you're a team of 3 people, it's very easy. You can be your like human linter.
Yeah.
So you you talk in a room, and then you shouldn't do this because X. you're like pairing on or more programming on a monitor. So it's very easy to be like a human linter. But imagine you're like 1,000 people now, and everybody should be consistently developing on the same code base. Then it becomes trickier and trickier. So that's where like your investment in linters as like a return of investment, which is multiplied by 1,000. So
yeah, and also to note that if you're 3 people, the code you're going to write is going to be pretty consistent. If you're 1,000 people, it's going to diverge very much, because 1,000 people with different opinions is going to create very different code.
Yeah, and I know about the things you said before. I think there is like an exception on like using your own configuration, and it's around another usage of linter we didn't mention yet, which is as a learning tool. Because imagine you're starting out with a new, because most of us don't start, we just inherit like software of the past, or we join a company and there is already a big code base. So we need to continue a route that was already, steps that were already taken by someone else. But imagine you're starting out and you're maybe using a new technology or something that you want to say, okay, I want to follow best practices for this language because it's how I will find more developers that know these patterns I will use in my code base, let's say. And then in that case, a linter can help you on as a learning tool to say, okay, I will use the default configuration for, let's say, ESLint. I know that there are a lot of projects that use the same configuration, and as ESLint authors agree with that configuration, otherwise they wouldn't use it as default, right? So in that case, that will help me to maintain some like best practices. So some patterns that are consistent with the JavaScript like community, and will help me also learn stuff, because I will see, oh, an error about this. Oh, is this a problem? Like you put double equal and say, oh, why double equal is a problem? I'm coming from like Java and was okay. No, it's not okay because X, Y, Z. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. If you want to get started, then choosing someone else's configuration will be helpful. If you're more familiar with it, then you can start making up your own opinions, which is always a bit risky, but yeah.
You're opinionated. You're from what you said about linters and stuff. Yeah, I see you as an opinionated developer.
I am an opinionated developer, I guess. Yeah. But I do think you're right that for learning it's good. That said, you can also learn by choosing your own rules. You can go through the ESLint documentation and go through each rule one by one, and because it's going to have a lot more documentation than the errors you're going to get, you're going to learn more.
Yeah.
But it's a bigger investment.
Yeah, it's a kind of, you need to talk to your manager. I'm not developing any feature for the next 2 weeks because I'm going to read the ESLint documentation from scratch. Okay, I want to ask you something else. So, which is another hot topic about linters, which is like automatic fixing. It can be even like when with bad linters can be even more dangerous, because when it's like a linter that tells you like a lie, you can say, oh, I don't want to follow you. But when you're like an automatic fixing linter tells you a lie and apply the lie and you commit the lie, you will be in danger. So what do you think about automatic fixing, and what should people do? Should they trust them? Linters should behave differently?
Well, first of all, I'd say that automatic fixing is a great feature, but with great power comes great responsibilities. So it's a great feature because it removes a lot of time spent by developers. Like if I tell you, hey, you've got an error on line 15, it's a security issue or it's a potential bug, and I tell you how to fix it, and the fix is correct, then it's going to save you a lot of time and it's going to be great for everyone. If I don't provide you a fix, then potentially you're going to misunderstand what the error was about, and you're going to fix it in a different way, or you just by writing code manually, you're going to introduce a bug. Like that's why, for instance, our editors have a lot of automated shortcuts or code modifications. It's because those help with maintenance, in a sense that they are somewhat proven to be correct. And if you use those, it's not going to change the behavior of the code, or it's going to improve it. And I think the same can be true for linters, where if they prevent you from introducing a bug, then it's better. But no, people should not accept fixes blindly. So this is something I quite dislike from most linters, is they, like ESLint, if we take it as an example, when you run it with --fix, it will apply all the fixes and just give you a giant if. If you have like one or two fixes that were applied, it's going to be easy to know what happens. But if you have code reformatting, if you have behavior changes, if you have plenty of different changes applied at once, and they don't tell you which errors were reported, why they were reported, and how they were changed, and whether those changes were correct or safe, then it's, in my opinion, very dangerous.
Yeah, especially because developers, like if you give a developer, they say, if you give a developer a PR of 10 lines, they will find 10 issues. If you give them a PR of 1,000 lines, they will find 0 issues.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what I did for Elm Review is I prompt the developer for every fix. So for every error that is fixable, you get the error message, the regular error message with the code extract with additional details, and then a description or a preview of how the code would be fixed. And something that I find quite important is that by doing so, developers, they can start to learn to trust the tool. Like if I use a new tool, I don't know if it's going to be correct most of the time. Like we have plenty of tools that are pretty bad, and we just learn it often quite too late. So I think it's important that we start trusting our tools. And if we prompt for every fix, people can notice, oh, well, this tool seems to always be doing the correct thing. That's good. And you gain trust that way. Whereas if you have that ESLint fix, which applies everything at once, you're kind of like, well, I guess I have to accept the fixes, which I call submitting to the tool, not trusting the tool. Which is
relation.
Yeah, it's not a healthy relationship with your tooling.
Yes.
If they're in power.
I think also I can tell you about another thing about Codacy that I like about, which is that tries to make a bit ESLint a bit more like Elm Review. So it wasn't on purpose. It wasn't on purpose, but after I because I'm not an Elm developer, so I didn't know Elm Review before getting in touch with you, and then I noticed this parallel, because what we do in Codacy, when we get the auto fixes from ESLint, but instead of like applying them to the code, we parse them and then we report them to users as like GitHub comments with suggestions. Yep. And then it's the reviewer or the developer that can apply the suggestions manually by committing from the GitHub UI. So it's like a manual process. So we avoid the automatic process of ESLint that I agree that can be dangerous. I have to be honest, I use it because I also am a developer. So every developer is lazy, and we know that.
Yeah, I use it too, but whether the experience is great and whether I trust whatever it did,
yeah.
We can do better, is what I want to say.
Yes.
And also one thing to note is that automatic fixes are not always correct. Like even if they are technically correct, it's not always the best solution. So for instance, the example that I tend to use is if I have an unused function that the linter reports to me, is going to suggest removing it. And in the case of elm-review, it's going to give you a fix to automatically remove it, which is great. But the correct solution to the problem is not always to remove the function. For instance, if I just wrote that function and I forgot to use it when I wanted to use it, then the correct solution is not to remove the function. It is to actually start using it, which is again a reason of why you should prompt for every error in order to notice that function was unused and that you should not remove it automatically.
Yeah. Also, this is like using like unused function, like on a higher level, is one of the techniques of continuous delivery to like try to deploy code on every commit without having it to production. So you can use feature flagging, but at the same time you can say, okay, this function we have already the entry point, but we're not calling yet in production because it's not yet done. But I want to go to the main branch.
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to merge PRs and I want to have like huge PRs that that give me huge conflicts when I merge them. So if I have a linter that automatically deletes the code that I want to start using like next week, I wouldn't be like very happy. Yes, definitely.
This is actually one of the best features of elm-review. The one that it's most liked is that it is really good at removing dead code and doing so safely. The only question is the only restraint that people have is like, oh, but maybe we want to use it later, and often no, that's not true. But yeah, being able to remove dead code is just really good.
that is like a killer feature for Linter. I agree. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I want to ask you another thing, which I know that you have opinions about it.
Do we have the time for that?
Maybe we go very, very, very fast through it, which is like disabling linter errors, like locally, like in a single place of your code.
Yeah.
Is it good? Is it bad? What do you think?
Yes and no. It's bad. So what you're talking about is like using disable comments or suppression comments. I don't know what people tend to use.
There are different techniques, but the idea is that you have like 100 different errors of that type, but that specific one you don't want it because some reason that you have as a human that linter doesn't have, and you want to disable. So maybe you put a comment like, yes, lint, please disable for me, or a compiler suppression, blah blah blah, whatever.
Yeah, so I don't like those suppression comments, and it's a feature that is not in elm-review. People wanted it in the beginning, and now they're not asking for it. They're pretty happy without it. So it is something that can work. Whether it will work for most linters, probably not, but it's something to aim for, I'd say. So in my opinion, there are like 4 reasons why you would use suppression comments, and like one of them is if the linter is reporting an issue, reporting a false positive. And in that case, the proper solution is to try to improve the linter somehow, and to file a bug reports. If it's not possible to solve the false positive, then maybe we can do it through additional configuration, or maybe we should rethink the rule. And that is something that I think people don't reach out for enough. In elm-review, like we aim for no false positives, and that works well. But sometimes we just have to say, well, this is not going to be a rule. It's not going to be worth the effort, or worth the pain that you're going to get. Another instance where you would use disable comments, and this is like a really bad one, is when you have effective false positives. So real errors, but that you think are wrong. So false positives. And there can be multiple reasons for that, for you getting that. Is one, you disagree with the rule, and therefore you disagree with the error. And in that case, the solution is instead to disable the rule instead of ignoring that specific error. Maybe you will need to find a few reports to notice, okay, well, actually this rule is worthless to me. But yeah. And the other case where this can happen is when the rule is correct, but you don't understand the problem. You think it's wrong. And that can be an issue about explaining the error, having a bad error message. And that's something that I find in a lot of linters. They tend to restrict how much space, how long their error message will be. So ESLint and most linters really have like a one-liner to explain the whole problem. And basically, I think they're telling you, oh, go read the documentation. Everything is in there. In Elm Review, we tend to add a lot more details in the error message, and the experience seems to be better, in my experience at least. And then the other reasons why you might want to use disable comments is if you are pressed for time, which is like you want to ship a feature, you don't want to do the correct approach yet, you want to leave that for later. That's fair. I don't have anything to say about that. And the other one where people tend to abuse disable comments for, maybe abuse, is when they want to introduce a new rule to their code base, but it has a lot of existing errors. And for me, there's a much better solution for that, which in Elm Review we call a suppression system, which other linters call baselines, which is basically we are going to ignore all the existing errors, but we're going to report all the new ones. And we're, at least in the case of Elm Review, we're going to push you towards fixing the existing ones slowly, but it has to be done at some point.
That's really nice. That's really nice.
It's really a good system in practice. I'm really surprised that there are not a lot more linters that use that system.
Yeah, also because I would that that reason would be the main reason to use comments for me, because usually I mean, it happens that you want to retrofit linters in a code base that wasn't developed with linters in mind, and wasn't developed with those rules in mind. So you can either have like a warning level, and so you will have your terminal full of text that you will never read because it's too much, or you want to use the error level. So one single failure will crash your linter, will crash your pipeline, but you want also to suppress existing errors, because you don't want to go and in a 1 million line code base and fix them all, because it's impossible in a single run, let's say. So having like a snapshot of your current status, and then every time you touch the code base, you want to fix the errors in the diff, maybe in the area you touched.
Potentially,
yeah. And it's also something that we do at Codacy, which is like to do a snapshot, so run everything at the beginning, and that is your baseline, which can be like, I don't know, if you have 5,000 issues in your code base, and then report, which can be a bit to be nervous about. But and then every time you do a PR on that piece of code, and that issue comes out, then you are forced, because then it will fail your PR, and then you're forced to fix it.
Yeah, I think I have to say that warnings is not a system that works. Like plenty of linters, they have this severity system with severity levels.
Also compilers, not only linters.
Yeah, some of them do as well. Yeah. Well, I guess when you have warnings, it's basically there's a linter built in that.
Yeah, but for example, in Scala, the first thing I do when I set up a project is to enable my -x warnings as errors. I don't remember the name, but it's like to report every warning as an error.
Yeah.
Because.
And yeah, it doesn't work because, as you said, you're gonna end up with a big wall of warnings, and you're not gonna see them. So basically,
because having 1,000 or 1,001, you don't notice the difference. So
No.
you introduce new one and you don't notice.
Yeah.
You honestly don't notice.
So another thing that I don't like about disable comments is the mindset that goes with it. So the applications that I listed before about disable comments, some of them are okay, like they're fair to use, but the problem is that it gets you into a mindset where it becomes acceptable to use them. Like you're getting a linter error and you're gonna wonder, am I going to fix the issue or am I going to suppress it? And ideally, your way of thinking should be, how do I fix it? You shouldn't think about how should I suppress it first. So it's kind of like if you're pairing with someone, with another engineer, which a linter is kind of similar to that, right? So imagine you're with a senior engineer and they're very good, and sometimes they tell you, hey, there's an error here, or I think this could be improved. And ideally, you just want to say, okay, let's look at what you pointed at, and let's try to improve it, or let's think of how we can change the code. But if you have these disable comments, it's kind of like the engineer is telling you something, and you tell it to shut up. Like, I don't want to hear your opinion. And that's like, if you pair with someone, you don't want to have the option to say shut up. Like, that's not a healthy relationship.
Yeah. Also, it's triggering the lazy part of you, because the lazy part of you will always want to delay the fix for later.
Yeah.
But we all know that later will be never.
Very likely, yes. Unless you nag people to do the right thing, but yeah, it's hard.
And if you like disable 3 warnings, 4, it's fine. But when you have 1,000, then the bugs start to appear, and then your customer will start to complain and scream, and they will be much unhappier than like having fixed all these errors one by one when they appeared the first time.
Yeah, it's also frustrating to notice. Okay, well, we found the bug, the source of the bug, and it was reported by our linter, but we told it to shut up. So, like, that's not gonna work well with your manager.
We don't tell people that.
Yeah.
We don't tell people that.
Yeah.
Well, after a very heated discussion on the disabling comments, I think we have some interesting questions in our Q&A, if we can address them.
Yes.
Vitalis is asking, what are some best practices for integrating linters into a development workflow? I think, this has an extra comment here about someone pointing out that workflows can be used to compromise your code. I wonder if you have thoughts on that.
I'm not sure what they mean by development workflow. I'm guessing, I guess my answer is like, try to integrate your linter into an editor so that you get the feedback quickly. You don't have to fix everything right now, but it's good to have that feedback, just like a senior engineer would be next to you and telling you about problems. But the important thing, in my opinion, is definitely that a linter should be enforced in your CI or your codacy tool, so that you don't get more errors after your merge. Because otherwise you're just pushing a problem from you to another colleague somewhere else, or maybe even to a QA person or a user.
Or your future yourself.
Future yourself, if you're very unlucky.
All right, thank you. There's also another from Jared Smith. What data or indicators do you use to determine when a rule is more of a disturbance than it's helpful in terms of productivity versus consistency and quality? Yeah, so to me, the main indicator is whether there are false positives. So you're going to think of a rule
that you think is worth having, or like interesting idea, like, hey, we want to stop using this function. Let's make a rule, or let's enable a rule that forbids it. So you're gonna try running it on your project, or you're gonna try running it, and then you're gonna notice that there are a few cases where it's actually okay for that function to be used. And the number of places where it's okay to not follow the rule, the more conflict there is going to be with the rule, the more you will want to use a disable comments. So that needs rethinking of the rule, that needs configuration of the rule. So it's really like, yeah, false positives is for me the main thing, which for a tool like Elm Review, where you don't have disable comments, is very easy to notice because you don't have a way out, or at least not built in. You can make escape hatches if you wanted to. But in a tool like ESLint, again, you can just add a disable comment. And I think that for a lot of linter authors, they know that there's an escape hatch, and therefore they don't necessarily invest in the quality of the rules, in the sense that, well, if it's okay to use this rule in this instance, well, people are just going to be able to add a disable comments. And in my opinion, that's not great. Sometimes they're going to be able to, they're not going to be able to fix the issue, to improve the rule, because the linter is too limited. So for instance, ESLint only gives you access to the content of the file you're analyzing, and sometimes you need information that is in other files. That is something that we provide in Elm Review, but is not available in a lot of other linters, and that is a limitation. And I think it's a shame, but yeah. So that's up to linter tooling authors, linter authors to improve the status quo. I hope that was good.
Anything else? Okay, so we're gonna close this one. There's more. So there's one that I think I would like to hear your thoughts about. I don't know if it's a very easy answer. 5 linters a developer must use.
Yeah, I think it depends on what the language, what platform you use, what stack you use.
Yeah.
Maybe you can tell us more. Yeah, I can tell you one that I think it's because I think you will use probably Bash or like ZSH or something, and I think shell check is like at least for me, because programming is Bash is one of the hardest thing someone could do in life, because it's very easy to get it wrong, and it's like I am a bug machine when I write a line of Bash, so I'm very happy when shell check tells me, oh, you shouldn't put like $ here, because it will create 2 strings and not a single one, so it will crash it here. And then yeah, shell check for me will, if you don't tell us your stack, I can guess you at least you have a bash file in your code base, and shell check will be one of the 5 linters you should use.
Yeah.
I don't know if you agree.
I'm not good at Bash, so I would probably say yes.
Nobody is.
Yeah. So I would probably say whatever tool you can use to improve your code, that's fine. And you're probably going to learn something if you have that kind of tool. I'm going to do a cop out. I'm going to say it depends on your stack. So for instance, if you use Elm, well, use Elm Review. It's great. If you use JavaScript, use ESLint. The advice I would give is, one, you should usually choose the linter that is most configurable, or sorry, not the tool that is most configurable, the tool that is most extensible. So for instance, ESLint is the de facto linter for JavaScript, and it won against all of its competitors because it was extensible. you can write your own custom rules. And writing custom rules is like a really superpower for a linter, because you can write rules that make sense for your project that you're never going to be able to get in a plugin that is open source, because it will not fit your use case. No one will have the same needs as that you have. So in some cases, you will need to write your own rules. So having a linter that you can extend with your own linter rules is very powerful. So that's what I would look for. That said, at the moment, there's a new linter for Python, which is called rough, which goes the opposite way of, like, it takes all the rules from the Python plugin ecosystem, and it writes them. They hard coded to the tool. The benefit of that is that it's really fast. So it's a trade-off. I would really say that they're not making the right decision to do that, but it's really working for them in terms of adoption. So why not? But I really hope that they become extensible at some point.
Okay, thank you. I think maybe part of this question has been answered, but last but not least, it's the same user, Vitalis, is asking, if you can talk about some other techniques that can be used in conjunction with linters to improve code quality.
Code formatters, code auto formatters is the one that I would mention, like, right away. Is so we mentioned that it's good to have a consistent code style, and code style means a lot of things. One of the things it means is code layout. It's like, how are things indented? How are things? What are the curly braces? Do you have semicolons? Those kinds of things. And a linter can do all those, but it's very inefficient, and it's sometimes also a bit partial, like it's only going to handle a few of the things. So a code formatter is a much better tool for enforcing code layout. So if you have a tool like that, so there's Elm format for Elm, there's Prettier for JavaScript, Rust format, Go format, or Go FMT, Rust FMT. I'm guessing that means format. Those are really good tools. Try to follow the conventions or the configurations that from your community, so that it's easier for people to get onboarded. But code formatters is a really good tool that simplifies the configuration for your linter a lot as well, because there's a huge number of rules that are dedicated to code style or code layout, and they shouldn't be, in my opinion. And even the team behind ESLint agrees to that. So it's not just a random advice.
And if I can tell another technique, I think we already mentioned that, and I think it's key to great software development is test-driven development. So try to write your tests first. First, try to write your tests, because otherwise testing and understanding if you're breaking a software or not is very hard to impossible when your piece of software grows. And writing your tests first on the perspective of your users can help you design better software, also because we are lazy. So if you're designing your software, if you're testing the software first, you're designing it to be easy to test. And very often easy to test and good design go like hand in hand. So try to apply TDD, try to write your tests, try to write simple functions that are easy to test, possibly pure functions where you can. So if you can avoid side effects, like try to delay them for later, or for like a smaller part of your system, because testing side effects is harder, especially, for example, testing that you access a DB or you call the service, it's very hard. Sometimes, of course, you need to test that as well, but try to have your logic tested in a pure way. So you have a function that takes some input, returns some output. So you do when this input is this, it should return that. And then when you have all the tests that are red because you didn't implement your function, you go implement your function, make the test green, which gives you a great like dose of dopamine for your brain as well, because you will see all green, will be very happy. And then you can refactor your code while keeping everything green, because now you have tests that that prove that you're not breaking it, because all the behavior you wanted is still working. Then you can change the implementation. Say, oh, I don't want an if here. I want, like, I don't know, I want an early return. No, I want something else. You can change the code and the test will continue to be green. When you're happy, you commit, you go to, I don't know, master, and then you start writing new tests. And it's a very nice way to improve your code quality and on the long run, I guess.
Yeah. Also try to do things in tiny steps, as you kind of mentioned, and use functional programming. Works for me.
Yeah. It was also for me.
Yeah, and also like pure functional languages like Elm are really easy to analyze. So I say that elm-review is a great tool and works better than most linters, and that's because it's targeting a functional language, not because it's great. Well, maybe it's because it's a tiny bit great as well, but mostly because of the targets. So yeah.
Okay, thank you both. We actually just got one last minute question, and then we'll have to wrap things up. But this has been very interesting and very interactive. So Jared again is asking a question more related to team culture. So it's, how do you handle when new people join your team and they disagree with the existing rules?
Yeah. So configuration for a linter should be aimed at removing frustration for everyone. Because if, like, you've seen this on teams where someone gets annoyed by a linter rule, like, this thing again, and they start being a little bit toxic. It's maybe a strong of a word, but maybe at some point they will become toxic, like, this linter again. And toxicity spreads to other people, so you want to minimize that as much as possible. So if you want to have new team members onboarded with your linter configuration, I would explain to them what their purpose is. So, like, if we enable this rule, what do we get out of it? Linter rules are always just a cost-benefit issue, or cost-benefit question, and because we constrain what we can write as code, but the question is, what do you get out of it? If we talk about unused codes, if we make sure that we can't have unused code in our code base, what do we get out of that? Well, we get the fact that we don't have to maintain that code anymore. We don't have to, every time we want to change a function, we don't have to change it in dead code because we've removed that dead code. So really try to find what the benefits of a linter rule is and explain that to your team member. And also, yeah, try to convince them, try to have a nice conversation. But also, what was I going to say? Yeah, just tell them to try things out. Like, if your code base is nice, then you should be able to try out a few things. It's kind of like what I like to say with juniors. Is like, if you have an idea about something, if you think that running something in this specific way is better, let's try it out. If it's a small scope, then we can change it afterwards, and it's not going to be a problem. Same thing with linter rules. Let's just try it out, and if there's pain, then we can reevaluate it. We can reconfigure it. We can remove it. So one thing to note is that new hires, they may disagree with the rules, but for good reason that you just hadn't thought about. So maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, and we're just gonna have to be adults and try to make compromises that makes everyone happier.
Yes, I agree with you. Also, I think there, in case like the new person is right, maybe it's better with a different settings. But then in that case, there is we need to let them understand the value of consistency, because imagine you have a big code base. Does changing style or changing this thing um uh, does it have like a return of investment that is big enough to justify going through all the cases where we use this pattern and change them? Because it's very easy that you go to a new code base and say, oh, I don't like that, and it's easy to change in a single place. But will you go and changing in all of them, so we will have like a consistent code base? Because it's at some point I think that it's even better. It's better to have like a bad pattern with like big quotes than like a good pattern, or like 10 different good patterns that are not consistent with each other, because we had like 10-20 different developers that came and proposed a different thing, and they didn't have like the consistency to go and apply it everywhere, or to move the code base to that pattern and made it consistent. I don't know if you see a pattern, pun not intended here.
Yeah, I think it depends on in the situation whether you should go for one bad pattern or not optimal pattern, or 10 good ones. Like maybe those 10 good ones work better for their use cases and don't apply as a general thing. But yeah, I think your point holds.
Yeah, especially because junior developer sometimes don't see the big picture. For example, you see in like with the microscope, you see, oh, this is wrong, we should change that. But then if you do a step back, you see, oh, but this thing is helping us building this huge like piece of software, huge system, and so helps in a different way.
I kind of like to say junior developers, they don't feel the pain, in the sense that like Elm is, for instance, a great language, but junior developers, they will see, if they come from JavaScript, they will be like, oh, well, I can't do this thing. I can't do mutation. Like, why is this restricting me so much? And well, there's a good reason, because mutation is a source of bugs. And they haven't worked with JavaScript enough to know that it is going to be a pain. It's like, well, why do I have to work with this Git thing? It's super complicated. Well, have you felt the pain of not using it?
Yeah. Also because maybe they are not the people that are like woken up at night because you're on call and there's a bug happening on that mutation. You did so likely.
Yep.
Yeah, but we are generalizing here in the
Of course,
just to have fun. Okay, I think we answered all the questions, did we?
Looks like it.
I think you have answered them all. And yes, some questions in the chat have been answered. So I guess I just want to say big thanks to our audience for being here and participating and asking all of your questions. And this webinar will be recorded, so don't worry, you will have access to this if you want to revisit, or if you missed anything. We'll be sending everyone a recording of this. And also, big thanks to our panelists, Lorenzo and Jeroen, for such a productive discussion. From best practices to automation and everything in between. So one last thing is, as promised, I did say we had an announcement. I will just quickly share my screen. 1 second, go into presentation. Here we go. After this Q&A, basically, since we're talking about automation, I'm just going to drop this out there. And as promised, I wanted to show you a sneak peek of a brand new beta feature that we're launching today at Codacy. As you may know, Codacy Quality is a powerful tool that helps you automate your code reviews. So you can focus on what matters. But now with the rise of AI, we're working to take this to the next level. So, imagine auto-fixing every single issue identified. But I won't say anything else to you. I will just say, definitely, if you're interested in this, check out ai.codacy.com. Check out the demos we have there and more information about all of this, and sign up for free beta access. You can start signing up from today and on. And yeah, before you go, just again, thank you everyone. And I also added here Jeroen's Twitter handle. If you'd like to keep in touch, it's here with any more questions. And as always, we really appreciate your feedback. So if you take the time to answer this 1-minute survey at the end, you'll always also be eligible to win this really cool laptop sleeve that you see here on your screen. We'll ship it to you, some cool Codacy swag, to anyone who replies to the survey that will pop up here at the end. But that is it from our side. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.